Did you know that the LabVIEW experiment has a Patreon? All memberships include access to a private Discord server where you'll be able to chat with other fans. Benefits to membership include behind the scenes content and sneak peeks at new episodes, as well as opportunities to chat and even code with Sam. To learn more, check out our website, www.thelabviewexperiment.com. It's your contributions that keep our experiment going. Thanks.
I think this comes down to that it's not just, programming, right? You're providing the service, and there's a lot more to it than just providing that piece of code.
Welcome to the LabVIEW experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes.
Make sure to check out this episode on YouTube for special appearances from Mark's dog, Rafka.
All right, I am here today with a good friend of mine, Mark Lund. Mark currently lives in Montana. I went up there last year. Was it last year? I went ice climbing up there.
Yep.
Visited Mark. We went out to Yellowstone, had a good time. I met Mark several years ago, probably 5 years ago or something like that, maybe more, at NI Week and the CLA Summits. And so, we kind of hit it off and hung out and talked a lot since then. And so, welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So you mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about the CLA Summits, so that might be a good place to start.
Yeah. So I like the CLA Summit. There's a lot of high-level discussions that occur there. I think it's good for people that have been doing LabVIEW for a while. Also, you get to interface with a lot of, good programmers, good people. So I like it. I'm not sure if I remember exactly when I met you. It was either there or at one of the NI Week sessions. Then, people are talking afterwards about one of the sessions, and that's how we got connected. I guess also in terms of the CLA Summit, in order to get there, you have to have a CLA certification, and I think that's always a good thing to do. For the certification program, when I took it, it caused me to program in different ways than I was used to, and caused me to stretch my wings a little bit. Usually, it's like, well, I know how to do it this way and get it done. But the certification program caused me to, do things a little bit differently or learn areas that I didn't really have to, maybe I didn't have to really know or do in my job. And so it helped me expand. So I thought that was good. So I highly recommend the certification for people to go through that process.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the certification. I don't put a lot of value in the piece of paper per se, but I put a lot of value on the process of getting the certification.
Yes. Yeah.
Of the learning that goes into learning what you need to do to pass the test.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like somebody, you might be able to pass the test without doing much study or going through it, but it's like, well, why don't you just learn what they're trying to present?
Yeah.
And then, you learn things. I guess it's part of another thing that I like to do is have user groups participate in those, because you learn stuff from other people that you don't really normally would pick up on your own.
Yeah. Do you guys have a good user group going up there in Montana?
Yeah. I lead one here, only internal. It's not external. So, but I think it's going good.
How many LabVIEW developers you guys have there then for your user group?
There's about four people that go up on average. And there's various levels of expertise.
Yeah, that's cool. And you used to work at Lexmark, so I imagine you guys had a pretty big user group going there.
Yeah, so we had a user group there. I called it LabVIEW Excellence. I guess we had, it kind of went through various stages of what we were doing. In the older times, we would have them just once in a while, and we would attend NI days, that type of thing. And then as time went on, I think we realized that we need to have user groups more often than just like once a quarter or once whenever the salesman can show up and have some, big, huge presentation type thing. Instead, it came down to like, let's meet every week or every other week and have it be a little bit more informal and try to, hey, what are you working on this week that's causing you a problem? Or what did you find that was, hey, a really nice, slick solution? And that those types of things were presented. And also, sometimes they were code reviews. It's like, oh, hey, I need somebody to look at this code, try and wrap this up. It's like, okay, well, here's a user group. The people that are experts in there can point out things, and the people that are, new learning, they learn things. They learn, oh, hey, yeah, that was a better way of doing it, even though the original solution might have sort of worked, or what the problem was.
Yeah, sometimes those beginners actually ask good questions too. So the advanced people actually learn something because the beginner asks a question, and it's like, wait, why is it that way? And then you got to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So our local user group here in Denver, the Lund, they meet every other month, or they were before the pandemic. But we started a coffee group. So we'd go every other week or every 2 or 3 weeks and meet up and grab coffee, a handful of us. And I would encourage other user groups to start doing that if the geographic area is small enough and you can pull people together, like just getting together for coffee and talking every couple of weeks is a really useful exercise.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the whole GDevCon thing of like, learning from other, and the CLA some of learning from other people and like not constantly reinventing the wheel and just getting inspired by what other people are doing.
Right. So kind of the way I like to look at it is we have different levels of certification or training. So we have like an individual level that we do. That's like certification for yourself or some of the training programs. And then you have this group. So that's like the user group, your little group that you're working on, that you work with. And then there's also the company. That's where I think Nancy made up the thing. I think she was the one that started this Center of Excellence.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's like, quote, certification for your company or the group as a whole. And so I think that's another step above just certification for yourself. And I think that's a good program too. I don't know if it's as active as it should be, but it really shows, hey, good companies are doing these types of things. Maybe you should look into doing what a good company does. And so, one of the things that they do is have, a technical lead and a user group. They try to, or it promotes certification and that sort of thing. So I like that program. Anyways, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in talking to Nancy, I think that program's like kind of on the back burner at the moment. Like, I don't think it's like, they haven't scrapped it, but it's not like actively being promoted. But you can still go on their website. At least you could last time I checked. And they have a checklist, which is very useful. And it breaks it down. These are all the things that you should be doing. And I really like their checklist because it's not prescriptive. It doesn't say you must do it this way. It's correct. It's like you must have an onboarding process, but it doesn't tell you what that onboarding process needs to look like how many training classes everybody should go to and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And
yeah.
So I think that's a really useful way of looking at like a set of like high level principles. Like you must test your code. Okay, great.
Right.
It doesn't mean like, oh, every commit you have to run your unit tests and blah, blah, blah. Like it doesn't go to that detailed level.
Yeah.
There is some danger in that though, because like when I worked at Westinghouse, big company, they had these procedures and they were so vaguely that pretty much anything you did could qualify under the procedure.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a way, like with the Center of Excellence, there was a certification and an audit, that sort of thing. And you can get a little badge or whatever. But it's like, well, is that all you're doing it for? Or are you trying to actually make your company better? And if you are, then you can still use the information that's out there on their website. Just look at it and see, hey, what can I learn from this? And I think that's, really more important. I think maybe if you're a integrator or something, you want to have those certificates that you can promote things with, but ultimately people are going to come to you because you're a good company or that you do good work.
Yeah. Did you guys do the whole COE thing at Lexmark? Did you guys actually go through the certification process, or no? You
We
didn't.
didn't go through the certification process, but we had most of it in place.
Yeah, I do want to put words in Jorg's mouth, but I remember talking to Jorg when he went through it, and he said something along the lines of, "Yeah, pretty much we were already doing all of the stuff." He's like, "We just had to like document it and show it to him." So
Yeah.
so if you are doing software development in a, I'll call it a good way, I don't want to say the right way or whatever, but if you've got a process, you probably meet a lot of the stuff in there already, because most of it's just like common sense stuff that you should probably be doing anyway.
Right. Yeah. And I also think that even though you're doing stuff, it's good to be organized and know what you're doing. Sometimes it's good just to have a review. And so this could be a good review for some people.
Yeah, well, everybody has a process, whether they know it or not, right? Whether they have it written.
Correct.
There is a process. It's just a matter of,
Right.
is it intentional, or is it just like, this is what we defaulted to because that's what everybody was doing and we never formally talked about it?
Right. It's like source code control. Everybody's been doing source code control ever since code's been invented. But at some point, people decided, hey, copying and renaming files ad hoc is not a good process. Let's figure out a better way to do that. And so then people came up with these source code control processes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of various processes around that now, and there's a lot of debate, but yeah, that's one of those things that I think like the series says, like, you must use some sort of source code control tool, like, but they don't necessarily say Git or SVN or like what workflows you have to use. So
Yes.
yeah, but there's definitely like, I feel like sometimes people are too dogmatic about what tools to use, but like I do feel like you need to be dogmatic in the sense that you use a tool that you have some way of tracking all the vision. Like there's certain like hard and fast rules, like you have to be able to test your code. If you can't test it, like how do you know it actually works, right?
Right. Yes.
But what level that is and what that looks like, if that's manually running the code and putting in some values, like that's not necessarily the best solution or the most scalable, but it works.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how difficult it is, it might be enough. So yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, there's been a trend to automate a lot of that type of stuff lately, like the testing and the building and all of that. And I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, I feel like it's taking what we sell to customers and just applying it to our own work, right? Because we're doing some manual tests, and your sales point is,
right.
Well, if you automate it, it's quicker, it's more reliable, there's no chance for human error, it's repeatable, you can collect all the data. And so it's the same thing with writing code, right? If you can automate running the unit test, you don't have to remember to do it, and you don't have to,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, in some ways it's like, hey, let's figure out how lazy we can be. Meaning, hey, I don't want to have to, just sit there and punch these buttons, go through a bunch of steps. Instead, you have a computer there. It can figure out all that stuff for you. So program it, make it do it, and then you don't have to do it again. It's just the idea of like, what version number is this? Well, you don't want to have that. You don't want to have to type that in 3 or 4 times in different places. Just program it so it types it in one place. That's the version number, and it's kept. It's correct.
Yeah, I refer to that as like opportunistically lazy or something.
Yes, correct. Yes.
But yeah, in my talk with Jim Kring, though, he was talking about how like doing those things over and over again, that's not very creative. Whereas like the creative solution is to figure out a way to automate it. And then that frees you up to spend time on solving the real problems, right? Because the real point of software is not to keep track of all these versions and stuff, right? The real point of the software is to solve some customer problem.
Right.
So if you don't have to spend time running the tests and doing the versioning and all that stuff, and it's just kind of automatic, then that gives you more brain power to then go and solve the customer's problem, more bandwidth.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. I like that philosophy.
Yeah. Cause I mean, I think sometimes like as coders, we like lose sight of the fact that like code is a tool. Like nobody really cares. Like anybody who pays you, they don't actually care that you write code, right? They want you to solve this problem, and you happen to do it by writing code usually.
Right. Yep.
And I think that's part of the disconnect sometimes between programmers and the business. Like programmers are like, oh, well, we've got to use this latest and greatest programming tool and language, and we got to refactor, and we got to spend all this time getting everything 100% right. And the business is just like, well, we just got to solve this problem.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're not concerned with the how. as much as they are with the what, getting it done.
Yeah. But I think sometimes too, we get confused because like doing things the right way, sometimes we feel like we have to ask permission. And I think that's just like a misunderstanding of where like you just said, the business doesn't care how, they care about the what you're solving. And so if you write your test or not, like certainly they don't care. So if you just tell them like, hey, I'm writing this and I'm going to write some unit tests, and they're fine with it. Versus if you ask permission, because I feel like as soon as you ask permission, it enters into their head that, oh, they want to do something extra.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We need extra. We need to ask permission to do this refactoring. Well, no, like just do it. If it's a right thing to do, don't ask. Just do it, and yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's also maybe when you talk about refactoring there, that's kind of a, that's a decision or a choice that needs to be made. Some of it's based on experience. Some of it is based on, okay, what should we be doing here? Somebody might tell you, but it's like, okay, what do you do when you can, jam something into the code, make it work, or is it like, okay, we do need to rewrite this stuff because sometimes it's really bad, and sometimes that's your own code, right? But it's like, okay, that's an engineering decision that needs to be made, and you need to think about it, because sometimes it's like, it's really fun to write code. It's really fun to make a new design pattern that you just learned. Let's try that on this old code. It's like, maybe not. Maybe all you need to do is put in a local variable in there somewhere and make that number be the right value somewhere else, and that's it.
Yeah. I think there's a pragmatic side too of like, if they just want you to update one button color or something and you're like, oh, I'm going to go rewrite the whole code because I don't like, whatever framework they wrote it in, I'm going to write it my own. Right. That's not very, you got to be a good steward, I think, of like the business resources and stuff, because there's limited time. So you got to figure out like, how do I best allocate all of that? And I mean, sometimes like, if you're changing something and it requires you to fix the underlying code, like, okay, you go do that. But like, sometimes it's not required.
Right. Oh, sorry. My dog.
But that also depends too on like the lifetime. There's a great talk by J.B. Rainsberger, and he talks about the economics of software development. And he draws a couple curves, and it's like the curve for software development for like the quick and dirty fix, it starts really low. And as you add features, it just grows exponentially, right?
Yes.
And if you do a little bit of design up front, you do things, quote, the right way, whatever that means, right? Like test-driven development, continuous integration, et cetera. It starts out higher because there's more of an initial cost, but then over time, it changes much less.
Right.
Those two graphs cross at a point. And so if your project is shorter than that point in time, it's better to do the quick and dirty one because you'll save money. Yep. But after that point in time, then it changes exponentially.
Right.
But the dilemma is you don't actually know where those two things cross.
Right. You don't.
It's kind of unpredictable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then too, sometimes like you think you're only doing this one little thing, and then you keep getting asked to do one more little thing. And eventually once you duct tape enough things on, then it gets to be really,
Right. I think that also applies to, businesses, who they're going to hire, and even within your own employees. It's like, well, do we hire somebody who's an expert, or do we hire just, some new person? And it's like, well, all we need is to get this little thing done. It's like, okay, well, we could hire a low cost person maybe. And so, when you talk about the complexity where those lines cross, I think that graph applies to not just the volume or the amount of code there, but even who you are going to use to produce that code.
Yeah. I think from a company perspective, and this is just me, and this is the first time I've kind of had this thought and exploring this, but it seems to me that investing in your onboarding process is very valuable because it's hard to find experts and they charge a lot. Yeah. And even if you find an expert, they're not an expert in your domain or whatever you're doing, right? They might be a LabVIEW expert, but they're not an expert at optics or electronics or whatever you're doing. And so there's a little learning curve. And, maybe they're an expert at DQMH and you're using Active Framework or vice versa. And so there's some learning curve there too. So you're still got to train them. And you still got to teach them on your set of tools. And, oh, we use Jira and he's used to using Bugzilla or whatever it happens to be. They got to learn your workflow. So if you've got to train people anyway, why spend the extra money and get the very expensive expert if you can build up your own internal expertise? But that takes time and energy and effort. And so,
yes.
Yep. That's what I would like to do in my business is try to figure out a way to get my foot in the door at companies and like have them outsource some of their onboarding. Cause I think there's some value in that. Yeah. So like, you don't have to then put together all the training resources yourself. You can hire somebody else to come in and train them.
Right. And hopefully that person who's training kind of knows, hey, this is the important stuff, so that onboarding process can be, the overall cost of that onboarding could be reduced.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cause you can have a consultant who's versed in how you do things, and then they can come up with custom content.
You
won't get from the NI training.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Not that the NI training is bad, but like it's definitely not going to be customized to fit into your particular way of doing things in your workflow.
Correct. Yep.
And I do think too, some of that too, when it comes to learning workflows and stuff, I'm very big on like understanding the philosophy behind it, like why they made certain design decisions and stuff. It's like if you study any kind of military stuff, they always talk about like the commander's intent, right? Like, we're charging this hill, but why are we doing it? We're doing it because we want to rescue the hostages or something or whatever, right? And so if they move the hostages, well, the goal is not to charge up the hill. The goal is to follow the hostages kind of thing. Like that type of thing, that like by understanding what the goal is and what the philosophy is behind it, you can adjust on the fly and make the right decision, as opposed to just like blindly following a set of rules.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So that's always interesting.
This episode of the LabVIEW Experiment podcast is brought to you by Chinese finger traps. Chinese finger traps are a great tool for frustrating children, getting out of helping your friend move, and procrastination. Need an excuse? Get a Chinese finger trap today.
Let's see, there were a few other topics that we wanted to talk about. I have a list here. Oh yeah, so maybe you could talk a little bit about, well, let me explain first for the listener. So you used to work at Lexmark, which was a big company, right? And you were in charge of a team of developers there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was not in charge of a team as in like they reported to me, but it was more like, okay, I was kind of guiding them on how to do, on their programming. Yeah.
And then you worked for another company that was like an alliance partner doing consulting.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you could comment on like what it's like to go from one environment to the other, and like what you noticed that was different and what changed. And
yeah, so the first company, Lexmark, was a large company. And so, there was a lot of different departments, a lot of different things going on. And there were different people doing LabVIEW in all these different departments. So none of them really reported to me, but, I was there guiding them. So, I was not directing their work. That's kind of a different thing, to tell somebody, hey, I want you to be working on this week versus helping them with their work. But I did have a team, a few people that kind of worked for me in a way in one department where, we were working on common code together. That was different than like when I was working at the alliance partner where, okay, we have this set of tasks that need to get done this week. Okay, who's going to do them? Sometimes it was very easy to know, who to assign that to. Sometimes it was, okay, who might have an opening, and we put that person in there.
So I have a question about that then. Assigning stuff to people, when you say it was like, sometimes it was obvious, what made that obvious?
Some of it is, it's like, well, okay, this person's working on this program, or they worked for that customer previously.
Okay.
It's like, okay, yeah, or they might have a skill or a knowledge of that, that product or a similar product.
So did you guys have any kind of like plan then to like distribute that knowledge, or was it like this guy was the expert on the database, so every time the database question came up, he got the job kind of?
Yeah, I guess there was, the idea of like, hey, let's make sure other people know how to do this, which is always a difficult thing to do in a business, because there's business considerations, and it's like, well, if we're training this person on something that they might not ever use again, how beneficial is that? And then the customers also want to have their stuff done efficiently, and we're not going to be charging them for, training one of our guys.
Yeah, there is a lot.
So there's kind of that balance, and also there's different openings. It's like, hey, this person's working on this other project, they're not available, so we need to pull somebody else in. So there's a balance there.
Yeah, no, the pressures are definitely real, right? If you tell it, if the expert can do it in one day and the other guy takes 2 days, you got to communicate that somehow to the customer, and they may or may not be happy or okay with that.
Right. Yeah. And they may, who knows, they may want an additional person as a backup, right? It's like, okay, there we go.
Well, yeah. I think too, part of that is like your communication and your relationship with the customer, and like how you're billing them and stuff. Like if you're billing them hourly, then yes, having another person, right? But if you're on some sort of retainer or something, or like, you have some other arrangements, sometimes that can play into it too.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big fan of, like, in general, just setting yourself up with some margin. Right? So if you quote a job, like, leave some extra hours so you can bring people in to train and cross train and stuff, and it's not going to kill your project.
Right. Or even like, okay, you are done with your project and you've delivered. And if there's a few hours left over, it's really nice when they call you back up, you can charge them, as opposed to, oh, hey, we need a PO for this.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh yeah, we forgot about that. Everybody says, it's like, no, we don't work for free.
Well, as a consultant, I always like, so one mistake I think I see consultants make is they charge exactly what they need to get by, or exactly what they need to make on the project. And I think that's a mistake, because then as soon as the customer asks for something extra, you're in this dilemma of, do I eat it, or do I nickel and dime them and charge them more for this little thing, right? Whereas if you built some margin into your quote, it's like, sure, you want to add this little extra thing? Okay, that's only like an extra hour. I can do that.
Right. Exactly.
But again, there's a balance, because you do want to be careful of, like, if you do that too much, then they keep asking for tons of stuff, and then it becomes a problem. So like, you need to reserve the right to be like, okay, I can do that, and here's the price, kind of thing.
Right. So I think this comes down to that. It's not just, programming, right? You're providing the service, and there's a lot more to it than just providing that piece of code.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's very easy when you work for a big company and you're just like a cog in the wheel, and all I do is code, and that's a lot easier. When you're a consultant, there is a lot more involved.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you really just want to write code, don't be a consultant.
Yeah.
You'll really way more code as an employee, I think, because they'll just hand it to you and you just do whatever you're told. But I do think you have a bigger impact and more influence as a consultant. I like being able to affect the direction of a project, to have a say in it, at least understand where it's going, and, have your voice be heard. Like if you have a good idea, but if you're just a cog in the machine at some big company and they hand you a task and you're like, you don't know the bigger picture. You can't even say like, well, this task doesn't make any sense. We should be doing this other thing instead, or whatever, something like that.
Right. So I think that's like, when you are a consultant, that's part of what you're doing, is you're adding more than just, hey, I can code that for you.
Yeah.
You have to add some expertise to it, and kind of some general guidelines of how things are going to work out. And, some people are good at that and some are not. So
yeah.
You get a better consultant or not, just because you're a programmer, it doesn't mean you're a great consultant.
Yeah. If you're a consultant, your whole spiel is, I'm a great programmer. That's not a really good differentiator, because everybody's
right.
No. Yeah, that was one of the first things I learned. Because that was kind of my thing. I'm a great programmer. You should just hire me. Well, great. How are you different from the other 100 great programmers out there?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there is that opportunity to provide that business value, because I think a lot of the problems we make with writing software is not writing the right stuff, like not doing a good job of prioritizing and managing the work.
So, I like to use the priority matrix that I think Eisenhower started it or was promoted that, and so does Covey. So, it's the important, not important, and the urgent and not urgent matrix. Yep. And I mean, it's really, really simple, right? I know things are way more complex than that, but it can very easily, I think about it all the time. I have a little, I have it posted next to my computer. It's like, is this important to do or not important? Or do I need to do this now, or can I set this aside? And it helps often, because so often we put things, it's like, oh yeah, this is really important. It's like, no, it's not. You just thought it was, or, oh, this is so urgent. It's like, no, you can wait a little while, wait a couple hours or a day or two to work on that and get this other task complete. Or, otherwise we're interrupted all the time. We're just running around like a chicken, right? And it's like, yeah, let's be a little organized. I could wait to send that email to somebody.
We get really distracted by urgent stuff that's not important if you're not told.
Exactly.
I use a slightly different thing too sometimes for prioritizing. It's a similar matrix, but one axis is how difficult it is to implement, and then the other axis is how much value does it actually generate.
Okay.
So that you focus on things that are easy to implement and generate high value, and you ignore all the stuff that doesn't generate a lot of value. So it's similar to that important, urgent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those type of tools really help.
Yeah, I guess maybe what you're putting down there, that chart might help people understand what is important or not important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the important part is how much value does it actually generate?
Yeah.
Like how does it make our life easier? Does it earn us a bunch of money? Does it make our customers happier?
Right.
Yeah, however you
as opposed to, like, sometimes it might seem really important, right? Because a customer asked you to do something, but that customer might not really be the person who's paying for it, or the manager. Just, somebody on a project to mention something. It's like, oh, I have to implement that.
Yeah. Well, also too, I think it's worthwhile when somebody asks you to do something to dig into it a little bit deeper and figure out why they're asking for something, like, oh, we need this report. Well, okay. Well, why do you need that? Oh, because we're trying to make this decision. Okay. Yeah, that information would help you. But what if I displayed it a different way? Or what if I got you slightly different information that was more useful?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just giving you exactly what you wanted.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm sure you've seen this on the NI forums all the time. Somebody's like, well, how do I do this and that with a for loop and a while loop and index this array and whatever, right? It's some really complicated thing. And then somebody says, well, what are you really trying to do? And then they tell you, like, oh, well, there's a really easy way to do that. That doesn't involve any for while loops. You just do X, Y, Z and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's part of the consultant mindset too, is trying to dig a little deeper and understand what's really going on. As opposed to just like, looking at the symptom and slapping a Band-Aid on it or a piece of duct tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, Band-Aids and duct tape work fine for like flesh wounds, but if it's like a deep festering wound, that doesn't work so well.
Nope.
I mean, sometimes you do just have to stop the bleeding, right? I mean, sometimes like something is, you just do have to put that Band-Aid on there for the moment so you can catch your breath and figure out what the underlying problem is. But the problem is, sometimes people slap that Band-Aid on there and then they walk away and say they're done. And that's really the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've actually found that half the work, let's say, is really after we think we're done. Because it's like, oh, yeah, we have to debug that code, or, oh, we have to analyze that data. And it's like that data isn't coming out quite right. So, oh, that means that we have to go through there and, maybe figure out a different algorithm or a different way to display it, kind of like you were talking about, to actually make that code be useful, for the customer.
Yeah, sometimes it's about like understanding what the end requirement is too, because sometimes maybe you write a piece of software for them, but it doesn't solve their actual problem, right? And then you have to go back to the drawing board and like add new features or something to help them solve the problem.
Right, and probably most of the time, by definition, it's a problem. Mm-hmm. You don't know what the answer is. So just that, hey, we just need this piece of code that does this, is not necessarily always the answer. It's like, hey, you got to figure out how to make that problem go away.
Yeah.
it's not necessarily straightforward, because if it was, that problem wouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah. Well, also that's part of the reason why I like some of the agile methodologies of like prioritizing stuff, because sometimes like there's something that they think they want, and then they get something else, and then all of a sudden, oh, we don't need this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We waste a lot of time. I think like the whole waterfall requirements gathering thing, I feel like we waste a lot of time because you tell the people gathering the requirements, you must write everything down. And they're like, oh, well, if we don't write it down, it's never going to happen. So they come up with this huge wish list of stuff. And a large part of it are things that they don't even really want, but they're like, oh, this is our one shot to list everything, so we better make sure we list it. And then as a developer, if you don't understand what their priorities are, you start working on the stuff that they put on there that's like, they don't really care about. And you miss the really important stuff.
Right. Or sometimes those requirements don't even fit with the new requirements that come along. It's like, hey, we need to toss that other requirement because it just makes things more complex. Nobody wants it. It's not needed. And I think that's part of the idea, I think, of the agile programming, is being able to discard, tasks that are no longer needed. Yeah. And people can say, oh, they can look at that and they easily can be in a meeting and say, oh yeah, we don't want that anymore. Because it's there and there's a solution to getting rid of that task, which is really all you want to do, right? Is get rid of you want to make all the tasks go away, whether you don't do them by saying, hey, they're not needed anymore, or, hey, I got that task done and it's complete.
Yeah. Well, I think too, sometimes like just changing the process can help. So for example, right, we spend a lot of time on edge cases and it causes a lot of bugs in our software. And it causes us to like write a lot of extra code and makes our code harder to read and all these things. And so sometimes like if you're building a circuit board tester and they've got 10 different kinds of circuit boards and none of them are very identical. And one is this outlier that has this really weird thing that it needs to do. Maybe you're better off building 2 separate testers instead of trying to cram them all into one.
Yes.
Because if you just change the process, you say, hey, with these 9, we could put these all together in one tester and they're all super similar and they just flow through and it's easy. And this one that does something different, build a separate tester.
Right.
Because it will make both testers will be easier to understand, easier to debug, less expensive. So that. And I think that goes to the heart of like figuring out what the real problem is and trying to solve the real problem instead of just like wrote like, oh, here's my requirements document. I'm just going to go implement exactly what the requirements document says. And I think like that's easy to do. And I mean, that's what we teach, like we mentioned the certification. That's what the certification exams teach you how to do. But really the real value comes from like being able to analyze the requirements and say, okay, which ones are the most important?
Mm-hmm.
And how do all these fit together? And what's the real world problem that these requirements are trying to solve?
And it's always nice to have a really good requirements document, but they don't always exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the key for me for a requirements document, if you're going to have a requirements document, is to be a living requirements document.
Yes.
You have to be able to go back and edit it as you learn more about the problem, as you realize that things some things are going to work and some things aren't. And also, I think requirements documents, the other key for me that I don't see anybody doing is putting priority in there. Requirements documents should have some kind of priority. Like if you can only do one thing, this is the one thing that we need to do. And these couple of things are nice to haves. If we don't get to them, that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's hard to do, which is probably why you're saying they don't exist very much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's hard to do or if we make it hard to do by all the process that we put around and the rules and regulations. And sometimes they're probably necessary. Like, I worked in the nuclear industry and it is regulated. It's a really good thing that's regulated. It should be regulated very highly. But like sometimes there's a regulation. And I watched a presentation, I think it was Albert DeWeese, and he was doing a presentation and maybe you saw it was on medical devices. And basically his thing was like, the thing says you have to have meetings. Like you have to meet regularly and you have to know who's at the meeting. All you really need to do is have some meeting minutes and send out an email and say, here's everybody who's on the meeting. But yet some places have this really formal requirement where you have to fill out a template and it's got to have and everybody's got to sign it and all they go overboard because they're afraid of getting sued or something. So they implement way more than they have to. And then we just handcuff ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely saw that in like the nuclear industry. Like there were regulations, but they were so afraid that they like did even more than the regulations required.
Oh, Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you get too, strangled on that, you really don't solve the solution, or, even things could be more dangerous just because, hey, the common sense wasn't put into it.
Yeah. Or you get the malicious compliance part where like, the boss tells you to do something. You're like, well, that's really dumb. He's like, no, you must do it. And you're like, okay, great. I'll drive the bus off the cliff if that's what you want,
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like you do need some level of organization and some, but like it's about finding the right level, which is kind of why I like that Agile manifesto, because it's like, let the teams decide what level of organization they need. Let them decide what level of tooling they need. And it's about trusting people to come up with a good solution themselves, as opposed to like, I don't trust anybody, so I'm going to make you do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I feel like in corporate America, there is no trust.
Well,
I feel like they hire people they don't trust, and then they spend a ton of money on managers to like beat them into shape and come up with policies and procedures for them. And I don't know. It seems
I can see that can happen,
maybe I'm just too cynical in my old age or something.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't know. Like some ways it's like, well, do you trust? Yeah, maybe then that's good. And people will trust you in that regard. But I think it's it's made up of people, and there's going to be ones that are trustworthy, ones that are not. So
Yeah. I mean, people will make mistakes too, right? Like even people who are trustworthy, right? I mean, that's why places have code review policies and stuff like that, because even if, and that's why like you run unit tests and stuff, because you think you did it right and you think you got it all right, and then you made a mistake and so it fails, and they're like, oh, okay, now I'll go fix that.
Yeah. So I think that's where a lot of it has to be. You need to work on, people need to work on having a good relationship with their customers, and customers can not just say, using the word customer, meaning external customers, could be internal customers, that you have this relationship with them, that you build, that is trustworthy, and they'll be able to come back to you and tell you things about your code, or other requirements that they want changed or not changed, things are okay or not okay. They'll be able to be open with you if you build that trustworthy relationship, and then your work will be better in the long run. Sometimes it's not easy to do that. So you have to be pretty humble sometimes. Like, oh yeah, I forgot to put that requirement in there, for whatever reason.
Yeah. People don't want to admit that. Yeah. Because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
But that builds trust when you admit those things.
Correct. Yes. You just keep going forward, and hopefully your customers have that same attitude.
Yeah. Picking your customers helps a lot too. The best thing I ever saw on trust in business was, at NI Week, they had this Italian guy, and I can't remember his name. I think he used to work for NI, and then he like went off and did his own consulting thing. But he did a presentation. He said, think about your dentist. He's like, you go to your dentist, they do this procedure that causes you tons of pain, and you pay them. And then they tell you that you need a cavity, you got a cavity. And you come back for another appointment. So you take more time out of your day. It's going to cause you even more pain. And they tell you this, and you don't even ask them the price or anything, and you do it at their schedule.
Right. Yeah.
What would it be as a business if you had that relationship with your customer, that they trusted you that much? That you're just like, yep, you need to do this. We need to spend a bunch of money and do this refactoring or change this thing in the code. And yes, it's going to cost money, but like, you should do it. And they're just like, okay. And they don't even ask you how much it costs, or like, they don't even ask you when it's going to be done. They're just like, go do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the relationship that I would aspire to have with my clients, to just be like that trusted advisor that like, you're just like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And they don't even question it.
Right. Hopefully they like seeing you better than they like seeing their dentist though, but
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Get that.
It's not that painful.
Right.
Yeah. I know it causes that much pain.
Correct.
But sometimes, doing the right thing does cause pain, right? Like, like if they've got some code and it really needs rewritten, like that's painful. That's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's for the better good, right? It's like a doctor, like, if they have to do surgery and they cut you open to like fix something, the cutting open part hurts and that's painful, but there's a goal at the end that's better and they leave you in a better state at the end. So yeah, all very interesting thoughts, Mark. This has been a great discussion. I quite enjoy it. You have any parting thoughts or anything you want to talk about? Actually, I do have one.
Okay.
I have two things actually. So one is I saw you had this post-it from Fabiola by your computer. The what does it say?
Be kind to your future self.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Yeah.
I wrote that down so I could be kind to my future self. That's, starting it out that way. And often, I'll look at things in my code and sometimes it's like, oh, do I really need to, fix this case statement here? Should I break that up into 2 statements, or it looks kind of bad there? Yeah. I'm not going to understand what's going on in there. So maybe because it's too complex, break it up or put a nice little comment note with an arrow over there. Yeah. Come back later and I look at that and it's like, oh, now I know what's going on. And some of that is, putting those comments in there, writing them for me. Some of them are like, hey, 2 years from now, somebody else might be having this code, working on this code. Sometimes it comes down to like what tasks or what that I'm working on, or, organization. Like, it's a lot funner to just program away. Well, no, I need to stop every so often. And like right now, maybe in some time, it's like, yeah, I need to figure out what I'm doing for the next half an hour or the next day. I need to do my tasks at the beginning of the week. That's being kind to my future self, because I know that I need to be organized where, yeah, I could just do my own thing and then end up at the end of the week. It's like, oh, I didn't get any of my quote real tasks done. I did not produce what I needed to produce. So those are some of the ways I use that. I also use that in my personal life on things too. It's like, be kind to my future self. Okay, I'm going to do my exercise today.
Yes.
Yep. In the morning, it's like, yeah, go ahead and get that done. It's not sort of the funnest thing, but it's like, it's going to be a lot better in the long run.
Yeah. No, that's good. So the last thing I wanted to ask, part of the podcast is it's called the LabVIEWer experiment. And so it's to encourage people to experiment. So can you think of a time that you tried something and it didn't work out the way that you thought it would? And what did you learn?
Oh, yeah. I guess the first part of that is, yeah, a lot of things don't work out. Hopefully I learned from them. But I think, I guess one thing that I've done, or one thing in code that we've done was, we get this idea of, hey, we have this case statement. We can just add more and more and more cases. And, oh, well, how do we separate these case statements to put them in some sort of organization? And it's like, oh, well, let's just put a header on these case statements. That works. And it does, it's fine. But then you end up like maybe with 100 case statements.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, every one of those headers really means like, hey, this is maybe a different process, a sub process.
Yeah. Okay. So you start grouping them then.
Yeah. Should be in a sub BI, maybe little process that you call that does, because you're already putting them into categories.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that, looking back on the code, it's like, yeah, should use processes, little sub processes more often. That was kind of a learning experience.
Yeah. That's a good learning experience. Yeah. That kind of makes sense. Yeah. Cause you're already naturally grouping them. So just make it official and turn into a sub BI or sub loop or whatever, something like that.
Right. And I think that also comes into the effect of like, well, how do you make sub BIs beneficial? And you can just take like a big spaghetti diagram and, okay, I'm going to block this piece of code off. It creates sub BI. There it is. So I'm using modules and sub BIs. It's like, well, yeah, sort of, but the thought process is not there. And so if you put the thought into it, you can create, better sub modules, sub processes, things that can be reused, things like that. I think I've gradually learned how to do that better.
Yeah. Well, that goes to two things. One, it goes to Steve's coupling and cohesion stuff that he always
Yes.
talks about. But the other one is like doing things without understanding why, right? The creating the sub-VI, the goal is not just to hide your code, right? The goal is to have the sub-VI, do one thing and be cohesive and not be coupled to everything.
Yeah, right.
If you don't understand the coupling and cohesion part, you just select some code and you click create sub-VI because you're like, oh, now it looks cleaner. There's fewer wires and fewer things going on. But that's not necessarily the best way to do it.
Right. And I think that's part of the idea of like, if you can reuse that sub-VI, you learn what that sub-VI does.
Mm-hmm.
You can reuse it at different places. But if all you're doing is putting code into these little blocks to kind of hide it, then you're never reusing that section of code.
Yeah, because half of it doesn't make any sense anywhere else. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
No. Well, very interesting, Mark. That's all a great conversation. Like I said, I'd love to talk some more, but I think we're coming up on time. So
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Sam.
All right. Cool. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.